Yeah, hi everyone. So for the last talk, we're going to go a little less technical than before. So I'm going to talk to you about community surveys and what kind of surveys we did in the past few years and what we learned from it. So who am I? I just didn't bother with a picture because my hairstyle changes every other week anyway. So my name is Mourek, my pronouns are they, them, and as Blair mentioned, I'm the developer advocate for Icinga, and I also do GitLab trainings for Netways. So those are the main things that I do. In the role of the developer advocate, I'm mostly looking after the forum, seeing what's up in the community, what the different community platforms are doing, and also speaking to you at conferences like this. So let's get right into it. So what are we going to talk about today? Basically, why we started doing surveys, what kind of surveys we did, how or what we learned about how to ask questions, because that's a lot more difficult than it sounds, and the kind of lessons that we learned altogether. So why we started surveys in the first place was because we obviously don't have a call home. We know next to nothing about the environments people use Icinga in and what kind of stuff they do with it. And the only things that we did have at hand were GitHub issues where people would come to us with something's broken or they had a new idea. Icinga partners that gave us their feedback because we have always been in a communication with them, and posts from the community forum, which doesn't really reflect all too well on what people are doing with Icinga. So we started thinking, what kind of data do we want? Like, there is so much to learn about how people use Icinga. What do we want? How do we get to the point where we can say we know what's happening, and what do we actually need to adjust certain things? So we started different kinds of surveys because we noticed that we have a lot of different needs and there are a lot of different things that we want to figure out. And the first thing that we looked into were online user surveys. So we looked at different surveying platforms to just get a general better picture of the kinds of environments people are using, what modules they are using, and general information about the size of the environments and those kind of things. We also started visiting customers, so had in-person interviews with people. I'm not sure if there are any people here that we've already visited, and it was mostly focused around how they actually use their own environment. Of course, it's been very, very individual, and every single customer that we visited uses their Icinga in vastly different ways. I think Blair also mentioned it earlier with the user stories. There's just a huge difference between the different customers. We started doing social media surveys, which serve another different purpose, which is because they are so fast-paced, we could gauge what the current trends are, what people's opinions are on certain things, and also how to direct marketing in a way. And we have things like these meetups, community calls, and generally talking to the community, to different members of the community at the same time. So just to show you a little bit, the online survey that we did in 2019 was focused on what kind of environments you have, what kind of modules are running there, and what the concrete data is. It also included things like what you were struggling with, what kind of points you would like to see us improve in. And it was a very nice kind of survey because it's very accessible. You could answer it anonymously, and it was very fast, well, relatively. So I think the average survey length was about 40 minutes to answer, which is comparatively a long duration or a long time to take for a survey. But we also intend to repeat it sometime soon. And it gave us great insights on, how people are using it. What we also did, the phone interviews had the incredible advantage of people just bringing up new topics that we didn't even think of asking about. Because if you talk to someone about their environment, they will explain it from their perspective and just bring up new ideas, new problems that they have, and you're completely flexible in what you talk about. Our social media polls, well, they're good for engagement, good for reach. They're very, very quick, and they're open to anyone who wants to answer them. And in this survey, we basically wanted to check out, do you want more stuff focused for your own information, maybe some offers for conferences or sponsoring offers. And we noticed on the different platforms that we do those polls on, so we have Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn that we mostly do those social media polls, that we have vastly different user groups that answer the questions. So on Twitter, we mostly have private people that just answer from their own perspective, while on LinkedIn, we usually have more company or employee-facing people. Therefore, we were able to shift our marketing efforts, or let's say the kind of posts that we do, in a certain direction. So the people on Twitter will no longer get asked to sponsor our stuff every now and then. And the last type of thing are meetups, calls, camps, conferences like this, which are really great because you can have discussions with people, you can just come together in the coffee break. They're very free form and everyone can propose their own topics that they want to talk about and also show us what they are doing at the moment. So those are basically the kind of things that we did. And through trial and error, we kind of discovered some things on how to ask questions the right way. And the first thing is ask fewer questions. Especially in surveys and things like that. If they get too long, people will just stop the survey altogether and you have no data at all. So the first survey that we did was a very, very long one. And we had a completion rate of 44%, which is pretty good when you look at similar surveys. But when you look at shorter ones, the completion rate is a lot higher. So if you ever want to do surveys, make sure they are compact enough so you can just answer them quickly. Use easy language. And easy language means that you use very plain and simple English, but you also want to use easy language in terms of technology. So people that would answer the questions might not be the top administrator. They might just be a user or someone who looks at dashboards. But their opinion and their knowledge is also really, really important. So you don't want to shut them out of your survey by asking super technical questions. So the easy language means people that don't have English as their native language, maybe, or people that are not super proficient technically, also need to be able to give their input or skip questions if they can't understand them. And the next part is include all possible answers. So if I'm asking which kind of database do you use MySQL or do you use PostgreSQL? There might be people that use other database forms, and there might be people who don't have anything to do with databases at all. So you need to include the possibility of something else, and you also need to include the possibility of I don't know. Because depending on what they answer, this changes the whole data set, and you need to evaluate that. And what you also want to do is keep your questions bias-free, because in the previous example, you also state that MySQL and PostgreSQL are the most important ones, and those are the ones that matter, and everything doesn't. So if you ask a question, you need to make sure that it's not a loaded question in a way, and doesn't give people an idea of what they should answer before they even look at the answers. And don't conflate questions. Staying at the same example, if you ask what kind of database do you use, you are already inferring that they use a certain database or that they have to use one. In the case that If they don't have anything to do with databases at all, and they're just the person looking at dashboards, that might not be a relevant thing to them, and they need to be able to skip it. And the last point, which is limiting the amount of text boxes, is also a very important one. Because for one, you as someone who answers a survey, you really don't want to type stuff all the time because it's tiresome, it's effort, and you're doing it from your own free time, so just click through it and done. But also from the perspective of someone who answers questions, you have a lot of data that you cannot easily pass. So you need to go through every single answer by yourself or have a really smart system that can pass the answers for you. So we had a few questions with text boxes, and I think we had around 300 answers that we needed to go through because people were writing stuff in, obviously. And it's, again, data that you can't really use easily. So generally about the lessons that we learned is think about what you want to do with the data before you ask questions. Think about what you need the answers for before you ask useless questions that conflate your surveys, that conflate what you're asking the users. And also think about how you are going to use it in practice. So are we going to ask what kind of modules do you use with the intention of focusing more on those modules, with the intention of dropping modules that are not used very often, and thinking about if you can use a question productively before you ask it. And document everything. So we've had a few interviews in person where someone was writing stuff down, and it was very difficult a few months later to decipher what exactly was that answer here now. So it's best if you document your stuff already again with the intention in mind to use the information and to have any kind of actual recording of the question, be it in audio, be it in video, or a very, very detailed script. And surveys like we did in 2019 need to be repeated in a way to see a flow of data, because having just a single point in time will tell you a bit about what stuff is like right now, but you cannot really use what you're gathering if you don't have a history behind it. I mean, it's the same in monitoring itself. You need some sort of history to make sense of the data. And talking in person is a lot more valuable than you might think. Because if you have a survey to fill in, you have no way to detail into it, to gather the flexibility that you have in an in-person meeting. You can't ask another question afterwards if you don't understand it. So having people bring up their own points and having the possibility for people to ask questions back at you is really good. And be prepared to be surprised. There were a few questions where we were rather sure from the get-go that they would lean this way or that way. For example, the use of Windows versus Linux was something that surprised us a little, because we were wagering like, yeah, it's going to be like 80-20, if at all, and it turned out a lot more closer to 50-50 than we would have expected. And the next point is you only get positive feedback if you ask about it. So what I've mentioned before, or the way we had before we started doing more surveys, was issues on GitHub, topics in the community forum, where people would come to us with all of the things that didn't work, instead of telling us, hey, you did good, because why would they? There's no place for it, really. And, oh, that's bright. That is basically the kind of stuff that we got back in the survey, and just seeing people telling us we did a good job was something that we didn't have before. I mean, we do in-person events, but just having it there was a really amazing morale boost to all of the developers we pushed it on. So make sure you analyze the data you've gathered, make sure you've gathered your data with the results in mind, and give on the feedback to the people that usually only get complaints, because that's going to have a big boost in productivity. So just having it a real quick. So thank you very much for listening. I'm just giving a slow end to the conference day, I guess.